It's on us that we be educated. If I'm doing a sponsored post, I'm going to research the brand. Usually I'm going to educate myself about that company, read their mission statement, watch their videos if they have them on YouTube, follow them on social media. But do your due diligence.
That was Sara Maniez, and this is episode number 116 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. I'm your host, and this is the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. So what do we do here? Well, every week my goal is to share with you thoughts, stories, interviews, everything related to food blogging so we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Before we get started, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who has given a review on iTunes or Stitcher for the Chopped Podcast. It's wonderful to see it, and it really makes a difference. Also, if you haven't done it yet, please head over to iTunes or Stitcher today. It's one of those things that doesn't take long to do, but it really helps us out a lot. So thank you kindly. Okay, let's get to today's show. Today I'm talking to Sara Maniez. She's of the site Life's Little Sweets, and I'm always intrigued when I get to know someone else in the profession and I find out they come from a different professional background. And Sara was previously an architect. So it kind of makes me think about, when I'm in Missouri, that's where I live, and I meet somebody who's from Zimbabwe and they live here, and I think, actually, I don't think it. I usually ask them, so what caused you to end up here in Missouri of all places? I kind of feel that same way about, someone like Sara, who's a Pratt Institute trained architect, how she made that journey from that to becoming a food blogger. It just seems like an interesting journey, don't you think? And her path is even more varied than that because in between the two, she actually got into sales for a little bit. And that's when I knew for sure I needed to have Sara on the show because sales, sales. I don't know that I always have a great relationship with that word, and I would love to learn more about it. And to talk to somebody who's been through the process of learning it for herself seemed like I could not pass that up, right? I'm not the best friend with the word sales. I think it's probably because of my own past, and I kind of get into that in today's show, just kind of a family history thing there. And also I don't know, like the thought of those words just doesn't feel very good to me. I just don't really like to sell. If I could find a job that involved no sales at all, I would be so happy. Of course, even as I say those words to you, I realize that that's not necessarily true because I am kind of a passionate person. I love being passionate. And if you think about it, when you're passionate about something, you are kind of selling it, right? So I guess what it comes down to is I don't like selling myself. So I kind of get that. I kind of remember one of my first jobs, I was a waitress and my boss asked me a question. And I remember feeling like answering that question felt a little bit like I was bragging on myself. And so I started the sentence that way, like, I'm not trying to brag here. And my boss interrupted me and she said, if you don't toot your own horn, no one else will. And that advice has stuck with me over time. And I do find myself feeling a little more comfortable with being confident in my skills or confident in what I can bring to the table, but then reaching a point where I have to, sell that to somebody, maybe as a monetary thing. I mean, come think about it. And food blogging, we're selling ourselves all day, right? So we're selling our recipes, our ingredients, our social media shout outs. We're doing that all day long. So why does it all of a sudden feel harder to do that when money comes into play? I kind of understand that there's this general lack of knowledge of the sales process and how that applies to food blogging. So Sara and I talk about that. And I love that Sara describes that she went through a lot of training to become a salesperson because I think sometimes it's easy to just assume, oh man, that person has a lot of innate skills, right? Like they were just born with that, or they just have this natural tendency to be able to sell things. But no, in reality, Sara talks about that she went through a lot of training and not just like learning it from books, but actually practicing it before they were ready to actually go into the sales room and sell things. So I just think that's kind of important to remember that it's something that we can get better with in time. And I think in the end, if you can find a place of confidence in yourself, I think that can make all the difference. I mean, for me, the big difference has been just kind of going through what the process would be like in sales and understanding where can I be of service to this brand, that we can work together and I get paid for my time in response to that. For me, that's been kind of a big, I don't know, like a big learning curve. And also just when I go through that process to think, what are the things that I need to have to present to be like, Sara talks in the interview today about, if you're going to go into present your work to a studio for being an architect, then you would have a portfolio of work. And the same can be true for yourself as a food blogger. And I feel like when I've gone through that process and I realize, okay, at some point they're going to ask me how much I charge, and I need to figure out how much I do charge for these things. And for me, just kind of taking the steps and going through that process has really helped a lot. It's still, I think, a little bit of coaching that goes into that as well. And that reminds me of something else. What's wrong with getting coaching to help us through these kinds of things? I think sometimes, at least for myself, I'll speak for myself on this one, that I expect myself to figure these things out on my own. And, if I was my daughter, I would, she was trying to do something, I would definitely want to have a coach to help her get better at something. So I try to remind myself of that for myself as well, that we all need coaching in some areas. This is a highly complicated field and a lot of moving parts. And so to bring in somebody to help every now and then, I think is such a bright idea. So I hope that's given you some good ideas for what's coming up today. I hope you loved today's episode. So let's get straight to it. Here's today's feature interview with Sara Maniez. Hey everyone, I'm so happy to have Sara Maniez. She's of the site Life's Little Sweets. She's on the show today. Hey Sara, welcome to the Chopped podcast.
Hi, Marley. Thank you
Hi,
for
I'm
having
so glad
me.
to have you here today. We've talked before just because you're going to be talking today about a topic I'm so intrigued about, and so I was really glad to have that chance to chat with you before. And now I get to share with you everybody else then, so they can hear the wonderful things you have to say about sales of all things.
Thanks for having me, Marley. I really appreciate it.
Oh, good. Well, like I say, I'm really intrigued. I don't know why I am so intrigued, but I am very intrigued to talk with you about sales. I think it's something that's kind of central to food blogging, even though maybe most people wouldn't recognize that from the beginning.
Yeah, it's sort of like this underlying current that
Yes.
it helps to be good at if you're blogging.
Yep. I love it. Okay, but I want to get into that, but I think first I would like to ask you a few questions just to kind of
Sure.
help everybody get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
So let's talk about Life's Little Sweets. What caused you to start your blog?
Okay, so I have read blogs previously, and prior to having my daughter, who's now 2.5, Margot, I would say I was very interested in the idea of working from home and being an entrepreneur and being able to set my own schedule. And my father had his own business as a real estate appraiser when back in the 80s, like before the real estate crash then. And that was an example to me. And he was able to be there for when I was little. And I just remembered that. And when I had, knew I was going to have my daughter, I was like, I really want to kind of be that kind of parent and be there for her.
I think that's so great. Yeah. And I don't know, I like hearing that because it's an example of how, I don't know, like you kind of create your own adventure sometimes in life. And it sounds like you had this goal and you pursued it.
Yeah, and I didn't start out that way. I really thought I was always going to be a career architect and someday be a partner in a firm or have my own firm, and it just didn't end up that way at all. So it's been a real journey to get to this point, and I could characterize it as like, failures, but having come,
Yeah.
you have to like try different things to get to, where you want to go. And um,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of resilience to kind of get through it.
I love that. I love that you said that because I think it's so true that you could, look at your life and go, what am I doing? Taking pictures of cookies and this is my job and yet
Oh
you
my
were trained as an
gosh.
architect and had been working as an architect and
Um,
now
I've had several points in my life where I have been like, what am I doing? And we'll be getting to it with when we talk about sales, but you just have to keep going. And
yeah.
even if you feel stupid sometimes, or like, I just don't know if this is right, it's just like, it's so important to trust your intuition and just kind of go on that. I mean, sometimes I feel very guilty. I've had a lot of education. I went to Pratt Institute in New York.
Wow.
And I worked at these wonderful firms and, with many talented architects. And I feel guilty for not being back in that profession sometimes. And I also feel guilty for not going to graduate school or, I wanted to at one point get an MBA because business has always intrigued
Yeah.
me. And, you know, I, I've learned to kind of get past that and learn as I go.
Yes, I feel you on that one because I feel the same way because I do have an MBA. I quit
Yes.
everything I was doing at the time. I went and got my master's degree in business. I mean, I love business, but I've always been more
Mhm.
artsy too, and so it was
Yeah.
I don't know. It's I think when you have both sides in your life, like I love spreadsheets and I love I love
I do
art. I love writing.
too.
You
Yes,
love spreadsheets too?
I do. And that is a huge like strategy that really helps me stay organized. And I did not always love spreadsheets. I used to hate them. So I really did. But I
But once you got
changed.
reeled over to the dark side, then you couldn't, yeah. Couldn't
Yeah,
let it go.
yeah. It's instrumental, really. It is.
Yes. Spreadsheets are pretty amazing. But okay, so
Yeah.
so some point though in this journey of being an architect and this, training that you had and the work that you were doing and anticipating your daughter, at some point you were like, of all the things that you could choose, I want to start a food blog. What was that? What made you do that?
It wasn't like a direct path to food blogging because I didn't know that, oh, I'm going to create a monetized food blog and this is going to be my living. And I only just, started an LLC this past October of 2016 when I was like, this is actually a business now. I'm ready. And that's going to be different for everybody. Keep in mind, it really is. But I was just at that point for me personally. So, and I would say, I went from architecture, and then in 2009, I was laid off from my job. I mean, this no one really talks about it anymore, but there was a huge crisis in the, in the market, and people who were involved in the building sector, really any business that
Yeah.
pays their, works with banks, they were laying off. And I mean, I
Wow.
was working for the US Navy at the time. Before that, I worked in the private sector. Collectively, I have 12 years in architecture. I started working in firms at 15. So, I mean, it was a
Wow.
huge identity crisis for me when I suddenly lost my job. And I didn't realize it at the time because I was really struggling with this and I had to go on unemployment. And I remember talking to my mother and she was like, Sarah, this is actually, I think this is a blow to your ego. And hair was blown back when I heard that. I was like, I don't have an ego, like thinking in my head, like, what ego? And then I was like, I do. I do have one. And actually, the architectural education does a good job at cultivating that because you have to stand behind your work. You have
Yes.
to get up twice a week and defend your work and present it uh, through 5 years of school. I did a thesis.
Wow.
It's exhausting,
Yeah,
and I was very burnt out at the end of it. I mean,
I bet.
yeah. So and she was right. I mean, whenever I've had um, a low point, or she's come in with some real words of wisdom. I mean, thank goodness for moms and friends and,
Yeah.
people, kindred spirits in your life that, help you when
Yeah.
you're feeling down. But anyways, um, at that point, a few months after I was laid off, I became engaged with my now husband, Eric, and I moved to New Jersey just to, this is a fresh start. And I was like, I'll move down there, plan the wedding, and just try shaking things up a bit. Maybe there's more job prospects. I applied to jobs for like 2 years. I did everything right. I like hired someone to help me revamp my resume, and it was like such a struggle. And I was like, I have to just take time out because this is not going anywhere. So what I did is I was like, I have to work. I've always worked my entire life, and I just really want to work. I want to dedicate
Yeah.
myself to something, and I'm sick of just like playing house and like it's fun for like 6 months, and then it's like, all right, I'm going crazy here. I need to do something. So I went to the mall and I applied for a retail job at a jewelry store, and I was like, never in my life thought I would be working in retail after. Not that there's anything wrong with retail, because I changed my mind real
Right.
quick about that. Um, because I met some of the most amazing people, some people that were like so good at talking to people and finding out what their needs are. And I learned so much
Mm.
about business and so much about just like effectively communicating and drilling down to what people's needs are. And that's what it boils down to. And so I worked for, maybe a year and a half at this one jewelry store. And then towards the end, I was teaching sales to
Wow.
the new people there as well. And then I got um, poached, I guess, from by a district manager of a larger jewelry store. And I was like, this is a neat opportunity, and I think I could grow with this other company. So I sort of went for it. I really didn't know that this
Yeah.
was my path, but I kind of just trusted my intuition at the time, and I knew this company had a good reputation, and they did a lot of training after my research in them, and they did train me a lot about sales and how to effectively sell.
I love the story because, what I'm hearing is you spent 12 years, working in the architecture field and you got training and you spent 5 years in education and
Mm,
defending your work 2 times a week. So
yes.
like you got into sales and you were like 2 years, you got this down. You know what I mean?
This
That's
is
impressive.
Well, thanks, Marley. Like, thanks. It was such a journey.
Yeah.
And I do have to give like my career in architecture credit, because I did learn
Yeah.
so much about
Right.
marketing and you know,
Right.
selling. You don't call it selling in architecture, but you have to sell your idea. I mean, if you're
Uh-huh.
pitching to your client, and if they don't believe in the project, and I'm sure this is true for advertising too, they're not going to go for it and hire you. And
Right.
you're out of it, it's like job to job to job. And so it's kind of similar, and I'm always looking for those similarities and what I can bring from this, other life I had to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, it's so great that you said that because, I know we all have days where we feel discouraged in our current path or trajectory. And I had a day like that, and I
Mm.
went and I actually interviewed for a job, and then I walked in and I realized, I think the thing I was struggling about with food
Mhm.
blogging is this concept of having to sell myself to people, and it felt demeaning.
Yeah,
And then I realized, wait a minute, I went to this job interview. I was selling myself there. So what's the difference,
absolutely. Was this recent?
It's sometime in the last year. Yeah.
Okay. And I just want to tell you my own personal life. I mean, every day, like in the
Yeah.
back of my head, I'm like, maybe I should go look for a job in architecture again. I spent so long doing it,
Yeah.
like and then I realize, all the good things that
Uh-huh.
are going on, and those are important to celebrate. And
Yep.
yeah,
All I can think of is that, if I got a corporate job, they would make me give up my Mac, and I can't take that.
I know. I
I want my
know.
computer.
I think I think the people that are working in full-time jobs and doing their
Yeah.
blog full-time, and they have a job that like is very understanding of that, that I think that could work too for some
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Um, so, and I mean,
If you could find something that gives you some
yeah,
flexibility, yeah.
yeah, and it can be hard to find that because not every employer is really going to understand that, and if
Yeah.
but
Okay, so
yeah,
Sarah, we got to get back to the story because
yeah,
you were, rocking the jewelry sales world. And
yeah.
so what from that caused you to start your blog?
Okay, so I had a few. I started out just like regular sales when I started at this new company, the second jewelry store, and I ended up transitioning into selling diamonds. And you have to be certified, you have to do continuing education to do that, because the price point is much higher, and it's the most expensive thing in the store. So you have to know what you're talking about, and to do it right. And you're also helping people with a very happy point in their life. And so I
Yes.
mean that's what I would always go back to whenever I was just like, oh, I don't know about like the sales thing. Um, I would say that to myself, and I did have opportunities to move into management, but at the point I was like, I became pregnant. I said to myself, if management doesn't happen before I go for maternity leave, I think, I have to keep my options open. And I had been, you know, when I moved to that job, more heavily reading blogs and really liking it, really loving the fact that these people were just doing what they wanted to do and not
Yeah.
working for other people. They're working for themselves. They're, be it a travel blog or, making food for themselves. Uh, and the funny thing is I have do mostly food, and up to like 6, 7 years ago, I used to say I hate cooking. Like I really did a 180 of
Oh,
it. I used to like vehemently say I hate cooking, but I would love going out to restaurants and like having people cook for me.
uh,
So that's been a whole like, you know, revolution in itself.
yes. It's so funny that you say that because I went through this period where I just felt like, I don't know, being in the kitchen felt, how do I say this?
Menial?
Like, yes, like
Oh, yeah.
subservient almost. And I did not like that at
Yeah, and
all.
I was so wrong about that. It's
Uh-huh.
like this amazing creative thing,
Yes,
and it's wonderful.
it is.
It's really been so great for me personally to
I
learn
was just
how to
wondering if
cook.
it was the designer in you, the architect, that,
Yeah.
I kind of put those two together that saw people in their blogs and how they designed it themselves, and maybe that sparked something inside
There's
of you.
that. Yeah, there's the visual. having
Yes.
having a clean looking design on the blog. I mean, it doesn't have to be like super fancy. I call it resourceful, but really that means frugal. Like
Yeah.
I really try to operate a lean business, and I wasn't always like disciplined about money. And then my husband's really good about money, and I learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
And it's about taking responsibility for yourself, your actions, and being okay with, you know, just feeling secure. You don't have to spend money to like feel secure, is what I learned. And but yeah, back to what we were talking about. I leading up to my maternity leave, I thought I was probably going to come back, and I actually did work for a few days, but it just wasn't. It just schedule as it wasn't working, and I did not feel comfortable with putting my daughter into um, a daycare situation early because when I was an architect, I saw several mothers. They did what they had to do. I'm not, no
Right.
judgment there. Like,
Right.
absolutely not. Like, I really admire working moms. I have many in my family. But, they were back after like 6 weeks. And I was just like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do that. It didn't, for me personally, feel right. And it's probably, some of it's a control thing too. But
Yeah.
I'm very aware of that. I really just, I want to be there. I kind of want to be there. Life is short.
Yes.
And that's why I call my blog Life's Little Sweets, and there's a little alliteration there. And I know it's not like the most perfect, marketed name, but I do feel like really that's what I always come back to, always want to focus on. It's like really enjoying these sweet, figuratively and literally, moments in life, and it's life is like a collection of those, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, I think that's the end of the interview right there. That was too good. We're done. No, no,
Oh
no.
my
I'm kidding. We have
gosh,
more.
there's so much more.
There's so much more. Yeah.
Oh
So
my gosh.
I have one more question about the blog, and that
Mm,
is when you first
mm.
started, did you have photography skills already, or did you have to kind of grow those?
Okay, so I did take a photography class in high school, and I did have to take pictures of my architectural models, like to record them for my
Yes.
portfolio. Like you have to be like this sort of archivist almost because you have to go to a job and like interview and show your work when you
Yeah.
graduate and or get an internship or something like that. So I always had to record, and I'd like getting into the process, it has always been my thing. Now, as far as photography goes, prior to the whole blogging thing, I never had the patience to like be like a gear person and like learn it. And it's really kind of come with, I don't know if I don't want to say age, but I it's a learned thing to be
Right.
patient, to learn to be patient, and it's so worth it to yourself to try to be patient and go at it. And I think I and also with cooking, I think I said I hated cooking before because I didn't know that much about cooking before. And I almost thought like, oh, like I can't be like this independent woman if I'm cooking. It's not true. It's absolutely a lie. And you can be more independent and be so self-empowered by being willing to learn these skills. Um, so I just slowly developed it over time, and I'm still learning so much. There's always more to learn, and
Yes.
whether it's with photography or blogging or life in general,
Yeah.
I try to say to myself, I'm not going to ever assume like I know it all, because that's when I'm self-sabotaging. If I say, oh, I know everything about everything, that's like the worst thing I could do to myself.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to proceed with an open mind, learn from my experiences and just kind of keep plugging forward.
I have to say, I want to be the person who knows everything. It's like there's some,
Yeah.
I
We
don't
all
know, like it's
do.
the ego, right? We all want to
Yeah,
feel
we
that
all
way.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay to recognize that because we
Yeah.
all do. We have that in ourselves.
Yep. And then the more you can move past that and recognize that you don't and be in this learning mode, I think the happier you are, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into the sales focused discussion because I'm so intrigued by sales. I think, I have a history, and that is, my dad had a really good job that he quit to become a
Mhm.
vacuum salesman. I mean, it's ridiculous what he did, and he did not sell very much. And so
Yeah.
I think, my personal experience has made me like, I hate sales. I hate anything related to sales, which is probably why I went into getting an MBA because then I felt like I could be like the executive and not have to worry about sales. I would,
Yeah.
have those people work for me. And
Oh,
now here I am
yeah.
as a blogger finding myself having to sell. So let's talk about that.
Yes, this is kind of reminds me of what happened with me prior to going into retail. And I had all these applications to business school. I actually was like, I'm going to reinvent my career. And because besides architecture, the other option was to be like go into film and be like a film
Oh,
director because they're kind of
yeah.
similar in a way. You
Yep.
have to
Hmm.
kind of keep in mind the overall scope of the project and also be able
Yes.
to manage the details. And so I always watched films growing up and like in high school I was, at the theater with my friends twice a week. I went to college. I went to high school in Boston. And so
Oh, wow.
I had at my fingertips like all of these great theaters to go to and so I had a huge interest in that, but I just happened to intern at an architecture firm and went that route. And so I was like, well, maybe I can involve business with film. And I looked into schools in Los Angeles, and I was like, maybe I really need to shake things up and just move somewhere new and forget about like how I lost my job and and it's and then I had this like twinge because I just something didn't feel right. And when I was doing the applications and I something just was not feeling right. I was like, I feel like I'm avoiding something. And I thought, well, maybe I can learn about business by working for somebody and
Yeah.
by interacting with people at a very basic level. Because when I was back in a architecture office, I was at my desk and if the clients came to us, towards the end, I was really going out and going on job sites and interacting with the contractors and negotiation, all that. And that was great. But I wanted to deal with people more. Like I didn't ever have that experience of like beyond like babysitting, having like a normal job. And it's very important to have that experience, or at least find that in some way. And I was like, I think I need to humble myself and just work and because this is what I need to do. So I did that. And it was really interesting. I met a lot of crazy people, a lot of amazing
Mm.
people. Like I'm still in contact with some of my clients. I
Wow.
call them clients, but they were same
Yeah.
thing. I'm I sent them a Christmas card, and it's just like
Wow.
these repeat customers that would come in and just because they wanted to work with me. And I was like, that's special, it's the same thing now with creating relationships with brands, I feel like it's very similar.
And so I'm thinking what I'm hearing you say is that sales is more than just about a transaction. It's about a relationship.
Yes, absolutely. It's a relationship and you have a job to meet someone's needs. They're looking for something. And I
Wow.
mean, at my previous job, it would be, a piece of jewelry or something like that. But really, I became very good at reading people. like reading their micro expressions, and because
Yes.
like people would come in and I mean, I mean, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously, like they wouldn't really tell you what they're looking for. And you have to be a mind reader in a way, or at least kind of go down almost like a flow chart I would envision a flow chart in my head to sort of get them to where they need to go. And, sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't, but there's a system for meeting people's needs. Um,
And you received training in that, right? Like your
yes,
company helped train you to
yes.
understand that.
And are you familiar with like behavioral therapy?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the concept of that where if you're uncomfortable about something, you just try to do it. And like keep trying to do it. And this company did like behavioral, I don't know if they called it exactly that, but it was like behavioral sales training. And so we would do a lot of
Interesting.
role playing and learning the products inside and out, the features and the benefits, and just so when people come in, you know what to say, you know
Right.
what to do, and you're
And then the
meeting,
more you do it, you're not uncomfortable with it anymore.
yeah, all the anxiety is gone because you've just done this so much. It creates like a muscle memory,
Yes.
and I did that in architecture. I'm going to tell you something.
Okay.
I was a very shy child. Like
Yeah.
have this memory of like people thinking I'm this cute kid, and I literally hid under my mom's like coat because I couldn't take the exposure. I just like it like totally freaked me out. Like people, like I was very shy, and I remember when I started architecture school, like getting up and presenting, I felt like I was like dying. Like my heart was racing, my like palms and my like armpits would be sweaty, like no joke, Marley. It was ridiculous. Um and finally, like I had this realization. It's like I have these things that I really want to express to this, often it would be like a panel of like 6 to 8 like very accomplished architects that would be like sitting in front of you, and then all your classmates, and they'd have this like in the hallway, so like there could be a large crowd that would gather every time, like
Oh my
during
goodness.
midterms and finals. And um it would be, and this is in New York, and
Oh
and
my
it,
goodness.
it like after doing it so many times,
Yeah.
it's like you create a muscle memory, and it could still get nerve-wracking, but it's like you have to get over yourself and just like keep doing it until it's like second nature. And for me to come from, being deathly shy, like to the point that like my knees would buckle, to the end when I did my thesis, and I felt like I was owning it, and just loving it and loving telling people about my, theory behind the design or whatever, and
Yes. And maybe even
having
anticipating their critiques and being ready to respond to them. Yes, I
being
could see that
ready,
be fun.
yeah. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is the stuff, this is
Yeah.
awesome. That maybe that's like a little moment of self-actualization there earlier. But I
Yeah.
mean, I think maybe it's these little gems of moments, and I try to remember that and get back to that, and think about what brought about that. It's really about just like getting across how you feel. You've talked about authenticity, and that's a
Yeah.
huge part of it.
It
Um,
is. And I kind of feel like if we were to translate this discussion to food blogging, I think a
mm,
lot of people would have that same anxiety about
yes,
pitching to a brand why your brand should work with my blog.
yes. And I think it's just doing it over and over
Yes.
and over
Yeah.
again until you're like, I'm sick of doing, I'm like, okay, I got it
Yeah.
down. Now when I'm, say it's like an influencer network, I belong to several of those. Um,
Like tap influence and things like that.
Yeah, and actually I'm like teetering on the analytics to like get their posts, but I haven't gotten one from them yet. I do a ton through Social Fabric. collective bias, and then also Linkia, and then just direct. But that's where I'm at right now. And so, I mean, I think I'm still probably, compared to other people, considered a smaller blogger, but I'm making it work as a business. I'm just like pitching like crazy.
See, I love actually
So,
you say that because I think, I mean, I know that I get this in my head sometimes too. And I worked with a business coach who helped me understand that it's not
mm,
always about like, you don't have to have a million page views a month
yes,
to be attractive to a brand. They're interested in some of the sites that have less traffic, but you have other skills. For example, you're an architect and you have this professional
yeah.
background. So there's other skills that you might have as a person that a brand would be interested in.
Yeah. And yeah, and at first I was like when I started my blog, I was nervous about even saying like I was an architect because but
Yeah.
then I was like, you know what? That's a huge part of who I am. And
Yeah.
I'm just going to go with it. So, I mean, it's a huge part of my identity and how the world is colored to me by looking at the world in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, pitching is just until it's like muscle memory. And it doesn't have to be these like long-winded pitches. It's very important to like drill down to like, a couple sentences sometimes. I mean, and this I'm thinking more in terms of like influencer network. If I was
Yeah.
pitching directly, and my first sponsored post was a direct thing. I was, let's see, it was like July. It was a few months after I started my blog, and I had always I'm a studier, and I've always studied other people's blogs, and I would look at the layout of other people's sponsored posts, and I was thinking like, how do they get these sponsored posts, And then I was
Yes.
I was on a vacation to this resort that we go to every year, usually in the summer, around sometimes the beginning of the summer, sometimes the middle of the summer. And my husband and Eric and I got married there, and it's just a very like special place to us because we've had
Yeah.
so many memories there. My parents have a timeshare there. So we go back there all the time, and it feels like almost like a second home away from home. And they
Uh-huh.
have these awesome like in-room kitchens, and it's owned by a family. And I was up there, and we had made this awesome like cherry chocolate chip ice cream, like using the kitchen. And because I'm always like doing stuff with my nieces when I see them, because I live in New Jersey, my family's from New England. And so the way I bond with them is like, let's cook, let's do a craft, let's have fun together. And we did that, and I snapped some pictures. These are like, I think, from my iPhone. And I have a funny thing to talk about iPhones too with you later. But and I just pitched the idea. I explained obviously who I was and told them that like I got married here, and the one of the owners of the resort saw it, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then I didn't think they would say yes. And I was like, oh, I have to research, payment, like how do
Yeah,
I
what do
get
I
paid,
charge?
and oh my God, what I charge? And I'll tell you, I charge $300. I
Uh-huh.
just like for me at that point, and I thought about the time I was like, I'm just gonna do it. And they say no, that's okay. Because
Yeah.
eventually I will get a sponsored a post, and
Yeah.
that will be fine. But this feels really right. We had a great time. It was a really authentic moment. I wanted to share it, and I was like, I started my blog with the idea that it could be a monetized blog, but I was like, let's see if I can still do this in 3 months, 4 months. And I didn't start out with the name Life's Little Sweets. It was like Sweet Sarah. And then someone complained about one of my friends. It was
Oh,
like that. It's not like easy to say because my husband and I call each other sweets. That's our nickname for each
Oh,
other. And so
yeah.
I was like, I have to come up with something else. And so I migrated the site a few months after I started from like the free WordPress site and changed the name then. So I had like a very early rebranding when it didn't,
Yeah.
when no one was looking. So yeah, but that first post was, that's, and I go back to that post. I'm like, that's how it should be. The pictures aren't like perfect, but that's
Yes.
fine. Like put that perfection monster back in the closet. That's something like I've always struggled with perfectionism. And I used to wear that on my sleeve. Like, I'm so proud
Yes.
to be a perfectionist. Like, I'm a perfectionist. And it's like at a certain point, it's like, okay, it's nice that you have standards, but you're ruining your life by like editing this thing to death. And
Yeah. And freaking yourself
it's
out.
and I'm
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a tailspin and it's not healthy. And so I visualize the perfection. It's a hairy monster, like and I put it
Yes.
back in the closet. I'm like, this is getting out of control and this is preventing me from posting. So
Yeah.
I've become much more prolific when I'm just flowing with it. So,
Well, I think sometimes the thing that bothers people the most about pitching is not knowing how much to charge, kind of like you were talking about, or not knowing,
yeah.
all the lingo involved or what the expectations are from the brand. And I feel like sometimes we're looking for other people for all those answers. And I think I love how you just did that. You're like, okay, I don't know exactly how much to charge, but I'm going to try $300. And I feel like in
Yeah.
some ways, if we all could give ourselves permission to like create your own rates and decide your own rules about them, and it's either going to fly or it's not, and then you'll
Yeah.
adjust as you need to.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of that no, because
Yes.
there's going to be so many no's. I mean, in the past year, okay, I wrote down the numbers and
Okay.
hold on, I did 50, and this is in 2016. I did 64 sponsored posts. Okay. And when I started 2016, and I did a few before 2016, just kind of like getting my feet wet, dipping my toe into the water because I mean, this is one of the revenue models that's available to us as bloggers. And coming from sales, coming from, learning about marketing through architecture, that felt natural to me. And there's so many other avenues people can go. And I would recommend people doing what feels natural with not being afraid to try something new. But I was like, I'm just going to try the sponsored post thing. And I also do guest posting as well, like second half of 2016, I took that on as well. But I did through Social Fabric and Linkia. I had some trade for product stuff too, because it just came naturally. And I know, like, some people are like, that's a huge no-no, but it was like early in 2016. And I think if it feels right, if it's like a brand you want to cultivate a relationship with, I mean, there's the time for that. Now I don't take, trade for products. I mean, maybe if I was trying to get into, a certain niche of something, that would
Right.
be, but I mean, I was like, if I was an architect and I went to a job interview with nothing in my portfolio and said,
Yes.
just hire me because I'm me,
Yeah.
like
Look how
they
great I
would
am.
laugh me out of the room, laugh me over to the elevator. I go down the elevator and be like, oh, why didn't they, I'm not going to do that with blogging. I wouldn't do that in my former career. You show up prepared. You show up with your resume and whatever else, you can bring to the
Yes.
table. And just because we're blogging doesn't mean, we get a
Yes.
pass on that.
So what I'm hearing you say is like you took on a few trade for posts for
Hmm.
product just because you wanted to be able to show that you have this resume of people you've worked with.
Yeah, that, and it wasn't a lot. And
Yeah.
this was after the $300 post that I did early on. But I wanted
Right.
to just have a portfolio of work, a body of work, and I started my blog in 2015, and there are people that have been blogging for a very, very long time. And it's like
Yeah.
I wanted to, using my skills that I have, me as a person, what can I do? What can I bring to the table? And, so doing sponsored posts was an acceptable avenue for me. And it's really been great.
Sarah, I love your story because I feel like, you basically have talked about how you grew up shy. You really had to learn about that, having enough confidence in your work and who you are, and
Yeah.
then you actually had sales training because I think it helps to illustrate the story to people that if you can do this, anybody can do this, right? In other words, if you
Oh
can
gosh,
learn.
yes.
I feel like sometimes, at least for me, I think, that person, they're such a good salesperson because they were born that way.
No,
But you're a kind of an example of how, yeah,
no.
you can be trained.
It's true. And yes, and you can fill in the gaps where, you feel like your skills are lacking by just reiteration and just keep on doing it and forming that muscle memory. And I've always considered myself a creative person, and
Mm.
I've been told, this is kind of a different perspective. I was always told by my bosses, like, you have that natural thing that other people just don't have in terms of creativity all through college. And so, like,
Oh,
that grew my ego.
yes.
But guess what? It's like that does not get you through. And
Yeah.
the people that are working consistently and showing up every day and not showing up like last minute with this like great creative thing. It's like you got to do the work, put in your hours, be consistent. And I wasn't always a very consistent person. I would fall back continuously on like, oh, I'll just like whip out my creativeness and like come up with this great idea. And no, it doesn't work like that. It's like
Yeah.
you have to put in the time, and it works for both right and left brain people. It's
Yeah.
really important.
Let's break it down a little bit. You did 64 sponsored posts in
Yeah.
2016. So here's a question I'm curious about. How much do you think your time is spent on creating content versus brand relationship?
Okay, a lot of those posts I've done. There's like a thread. I love working with cereal because we eat like a lot of cereal in this house, and
Uh-huh.
so a lot of them are like cereal category, and a lot of them are like. I do food and lifestyle, so I've done some like Huggies posts and children related stuff. And so it'll fall into that category. So when you kind of boil, it sounds like a lot, but when you
Yeah.
boil it down, it's like it's only a few categories that I'm working with because it's specific to my blog niche, which
Right.
is I'm a mom blogger and
Uh-huh.
that's my lifestyle. I love food. I love easy, fast stuff, and I don't want to compromise on flavor either. And sometimes I'll try something more difficult, and sometimes I'll throw a DIY in there too. So that's basically what I do. But if you boil it down, it's really not too many things. So I would look for things that were specific to my niche, specific to what I want to do.
That's great. And so then do you feel like, as you're working with brands, that takes a lot of time? I mean, it seems to me like when I'm in those situations, it takes time to reach out to them and time to respond to their emails. And I'm just curious, do you feel like the brand relationship part of what you're doing, does it take up a lot of your time?
Every day or almost
Okay.
every day in the morning or in the evening after my daughter's asleep, I will log in into any network and look for posts, and I will regularly I try to do it every day
Right.
and make sure I don't, because some of them come up real fast and they'll be
Yes.
gone because people will so you got to I jump on it. I want that
Right.
opportunity because I want it to be a business. I want to have my own business and do work that's meaningful to me. It's not just about this person's product. It's really a vehicle for expressing my ideas, on my blog, and it's a component that I'm able to make it into a business. And I think it's important not to apologize for that or feel guilty for that because,
Right.
that's it comes with the territory. Yeah,
And what about in those direct client situations where
yeah.
you're not going through something, like one of those networks? I always find it intriguing if I could, after we talked the last time, I've been thinking a lot about sales and how it applies to food blogging and kind of, in sales, they talk a lot about leading a potential client through kind of a sales process. Like maybe they
Mm-hmm.
start out as a lead and then you move them
Hmm.
on to a potential client and then you move on to becoming a client. And
Yes,
curious with your work with indirect
yes.
clients. How does that feel like for you?
Okay, and this is more involved, when you're
Yeah.
working with a direct
Yeah.
client. And I will just say it's really important to keep all of your information organized so you can track it. I use a spreadsheet. I call it my marketing spreadsheet, but it's more than
Yep.
that. And I
I did the
color
same
code
thing.
it. I track every post. I have a separate one that monitors, what I've made on every blog post so I can track it. I know where I can improve on. Now, and that helps me go back to certain brands and kind of motivates me to, set up my editorial calendar for the coming months. And when I work with a brand directly, it does take a little bit more time. There's a little more education on your part because sometimes some brands, they don't you know, it's their first time working with an influencer, and you have to kind of hold. There's more hand holding, and I think that's why when I started 2016, I was like, I'm going to do this year, and I'm going to try and make it a business. And a huge part of that is going to be sponsored posts. That's kind of why I went through the influencer network option because I knew I could see a lot of opportunities come up and but there are other things as well out there, and so looking forward to 2017 and beyond. I think I would also work with people brands more directly. I think you have to kind of guide them through, and then some brands also some know the drill, and you have to kind of stand your ground and know your worth and I think it helps to have your rate sheet done before you even go into negotiation
Ah, I love
and
that.
know that at every step of the way you can negotiate. You
Right.
absolutely can negotiate. And I'm someone that previously in my other life here, I didn't always felt like I knew my self-worth kind of a thing and
Yeah.
felt like I'm naturally a people pleaser.
Me too.
Yes, and just it's not something to be intimidated by working with a brand, and it's okay to be like, hey, come back with another thing. You don't want to be combative, obviously.
Yes.
It's always important to be positive and keep it light. I would say never burn any bridges. I mean, I try to be, have my ear to the pavement in Facebook groups and just see what's out there. I do see a lot of bloggers just sometimes burning up bridges like left and right, and I'm thinking, oh,
You mean because they're acting like, yeah, you're going to do this my way or the highway kind of attitude?
yeah,
Yeah.
and I just don't know about that. I think you just never know. I mean, sometimes if it doesn't work out with a brand the first time around, like maybe you just have to get your numbers up and come back, and it'll be better
Yes.
later. It's not worth it to fall down that slippery slope of that self-worth thing. Like let it take away from you. It's like
Yeah.
you got to just keep going.
I think you have to learn, like, I think you were saying earlier how you trusted your gut on some things. I feel like the same thing could be true here. So, for example, I think we're all looking for the science of how to do this, but in
Yeah.
reality, it's probably more of an art. And, you have your rate sheet in place, but you may get from a really big brand that you've been wanting to work with for a long time, and they offer you a little bit less, and you're like, okay, because I really want to work with this brand, I'll take a little bit less. You know what I'm saying? It's not like
Yeah.
this dyed in the wool. This is exactly
Yeah.
what I'm charging.
Yeah, and there's a time for that. If
Yeah.
you really want to work with the brand and you just have to kind of feel it out. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would recommend feeling it out and still knowing your worth, but feeling it out.
Yeah.
And then later on, just you'll know when it's time to kind of like dig in my heels and say, I can't do this because,
Right.
the schedule just doesn't allow or something, or,
Uh-huh.
we work in quarters. And so, like, if someone's coming at you with like cookie, wanting, not giving you the rates you need in like December, it's like, I can't do this, and it's okay to
Yeah.
say it in the most, civil way, nice
Yes.
way, with kindness and respect for them,
Yeah.
and their time. It's very important, very, very important to learn how to work with people. That's a skill.
Yeah. For example, I just had a brand that wanted to do a sponsored post with me, and they wanted to basically own the photos and put their own writing on it and not have my watermark on it and those kinds of
Mm,
things. Well, I charge more for that, and I had to
yeah,
explain that. So that's kind of an example of, though, I did it in a way I felt was very professional and just kind of like educate, like you were saying, you kind of educate them on how to work with you. And if it ends
yeah.
up that I don't get the deal because of that, I was okay with it, but I still remained very professional.
Yeah, that is so important. And it's fine to, like, in the contract when it gets to that point, really break it down. Like, this is
Yes.
define what things mean, because the brand might not really know. There's like, oh, with watermarks, without
Yes.
watermarks, full rights.
Uh-huh.
Like, I had this herbal company contact me, and it just like was a fiasco. It
Oh
went
no.
from like, all right, I'm going to do a sponsored post, and then they balked at the price. But it was very clear that they had not worked with any influencers before. They were kind of
Hmm.
new, and it just, yeah, I was fine with passing on it because it's just
Yes.
like I felt kind of iffy about the product too. I mean, it was kind of neat. It sort of fit
Yes.
in with my ethos,
Yeah.
but I was like, this seems like a little bit too much of a stretch. And so it's
Yes.
very important to trust your intuition. And there's so many other opportunities out there.
Right.
And yeah, I've applied to, I did all these posts in 2016, and there's a bunch that I didn't get. It's
Yeah.
like I'll pitch stuff, and there's all kinds of reasons. Like, maybe it's because I didn't do, or I worked with a
Yeah.
competitor like in
Yes.
less than 3 months ago or something. That's fine. Later on down the road, I could still work with them.
Right. Or maybe they were looking for somebody with a particular kind of background. You just never
Yeah.
know. It's just put yourself out there and let. I always say, don't you be the admissions committee, because that's what somebody told me in graduate school. Like,
Mm.
apply to where you want to go. Don't you make that decision, for the admissions committee. So that's good
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah. Get outside of one's own head and
Yeah.
try and look at the overall of it. I
Yes.
had to do this in architecture all the time, just so you don't get stuck in the weeds with a particular thing or really take something to heart. It's like
Yes.
there's a long, it's, blogging, it can be a long, slow burn and a long haul. And it's like doing those, being consistent all the way through, having a rhythm, finding your rhythm, being ready to change it up when you need to,
Yes.
trying new things.
I was going to say, I thought that, when you got your sales training to be selling jewelry, you got training as a salesperson, how to be a salesperson, how to
Yes.
read people,
Yeah.
how to kind of probably guide them along the sales process. But
Hmm.
I imagine that you also got training about the jewelry that you were selling as well, so that people
Absolutely.
could come to you and they would know you knew about the product. And I'm thinking that could also apply to food blogging as well, right? Because we need to
Absolutely.
know what we're selling.
Yes, it's on us that we be educated. If I'm doing a sponsored post, I'm going to research the brand. I mean, usually I know I've been using them my whole life or something like that. Hopefully,
Right.
that I'm going to. So maybe it's a new product. I'm going to educate myself about that company, read their mission statement, watch their videos if they have them on YouTube, follow them on social media, do one's due diligence, because it's a job, it's do one's job and I mean, love what you're doing while you're doing it. This is fun, you know, how often do we get to do what we love? This is like amazing. But
Yes.
I mean, do your due diligence. If you're wasting other people's time, you're wasting your own time too.
Yeah, so I love that. So, get your sales sheet together. And I think even honestly, just doing that, I think, well, what do we call it? The media kit where you know what you're charging for different things. I feel like that creates so much, concrete ideas or makes you ask yourself a lot of questions about what is at your blog, what's your mission statement, what's going on there. And I don't know, I feel like even just going through that process is going to help people a lot.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that I've always, struggled with being impatient and, learning the
Mm.
food photography. It really was a test of my patience, and now I rather enjoy it. And
Oh,
in
okay.
2016, I mostly use my iPhone 6S Plus. I mean, I know that's going to like horrify a lot of people,
For
but
photography?
yes, for my
Wow.
sponsored posts on my
Wow.
blog, Marley, and that is going to horrify some of our
No.
photography nerds here. But I researched the phone before I got it. My other one was kind of like dying, and I started out with an old borrowed Canon Rebel DSLR, and it was having problems, and I had to give it back. So, and then I was like, the best camera you have is the one on you. And so being a busy mom, it just like worked for me to have my phone. And at the end of 2016, I was like, I'm really kind of like feeling boxed in by the limits now because I learned it so well.
Yes.
And there's a time and a place for that. And I just got it, not even an expensive
Yeah.
Canon Rebel. It's just an SL1. I mean, honestly, and eventually I know that I'm going to have like great cameras and stuff, but
I love it that right now you're willing to, you're doing what you can with what you've got. That's awesome.
yes, it's okay. I mean, I used to be this person where and I still am sometimes like
I have to
getting
have all the best. Yeah.
I have to buy everything before I do this task kind of a mindset. And it's like I know I'm just procrastinating like a lot. So and I just worked with what I had. It's about doing the work, and doing it well and learning your craft.
Ah, that is so amazing. I love that right there. So, what other tips do you have on sales and blogging or anything else that you want to say?
I would say it's very important to follow up.
Ah,
Follow up. Keep it all in a spreadsheet. Whatever system works for you. I also do bullet journaling. For 2017, I got this passion planner. We're trying that out.
I have the passion planner.
It's you like it?
Yes, I do like it.
Yeah, I'm loving it so far for this, 12 days in January. But it's been really working for me this
Well,
past week.
you know what I do is I follow the week to week. I
Yeah,
don't do the monthly and I don't do all the questions. I don't know. I'm too impatient for that kind of thing. But
yeah.
I do like okay. So I used to first of all have all these notebooks with lists of things I had to do all over the house, and that was just
Mhm.
driving me crazy. And then I realized, oh, I could just do it week to week, and then I can kind of look back and say, okay, I'm not a louse. I've done a lot this last week. I don't know. It just helped me to have that tracking.
Yeah, when I set up my email list to go
Yeah.
out week to week, this was probably over the summer when I hired my VA, Megan Lamb of Cook Craft Love. She's awesome. She helps me tackle like a major project whenever I have it. I try to maintain the day to day, but when things are kind of like, I need help, I call her up and like, hey. So she helped me with that, and it's something I could have done on my own, but I was just like, I can't keep up with my content and like take time off to like do this other. It just was taking up my mental bandwidth. So I think it's
Yes.
okay. I also hired a accountant to help me with my bookkeeping. Um, in October when I formed my LLC, Maniez Design Studio, which is a different name than my blog. And I decided to do that. So it's important to recognize when you need some assistance to get things done.
And I always, I love to talk about tennis and, a lot of professional
Yeah.
tennis players will have multiple coaches and they don't, and that's
Yeah.
what I always trying to say is like they don't get where they are by accident and they have people they're purposely training to help them on mindset and diet and, all of these things. And I feel like sometimes as food bloggers, we're trying to do everything ourselves. And
Yeah.
it's know
Everything.
when you need help and get help in that area.
Yeah, and I'm definitely the type of person that wants to try and do everything, have full creative control. And
Yes.
it takes a lot of self-recognition to
Uh-huh.
see, oh, that's where I'm getting into trouble. And I need to say, hey, I need some help on this. It's okay to have help. It doesn't hurt
Yes.
it's going to get you further in life, really.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? That has been, I don't know if you ever read the book Orange is the New Black, but there it is way different than the show. I didn't
Okay.
like the show very much, but the
Okay.
uh, the book is really about what she talks about is how she was rich and had all the advantages in the world, but she got herself into this really bad situation that ended up, selling drugs and in prison
Wow.
because she would only want to do things her own way. And that
Yeah.
really what she realized is the only way to survive prison was she
Mhm.
had to rely on the community. And I just loved that story because I needed to hear that.
Yeah, I think people get stuck in their own heads sometimes.
Yes.
And it's if things aren't working out for you, it's okay to like look in the mirror and
Uh-huh.
literally and figuratively if you want, and really look at what you're doing. I mean, is it bringing about, the change you want in your life? And take a hard look. I'm not talking about being, hyper self-critical. I mean, that's not what it's about. It's like, do I have the tendencies? Know one's own tendencies, and so that
Yes.
way you can kind of head things off when you're tending to do a certain thing that's going to trip you up.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
love it. Sarah, this has been such a great conversation. I really want to get down to, I have these fun questions I like to ask people at the end of the
Yes.
interview. Okay, so what's one food item you can't live without?
Oh my gosh. I I love so many foods. I lately I feel like it's been Chinese dumplings. That's really
Yes,
specific.
that's
Um,
good. It's good to be specific.
and I have a dumpling series going on in because I'm half Chinese actually, and
Oh,
Chinese New Year is coming up at the end of the month, and so it's kind of on my mind. I've been like testing. I really should have bought stock in like these dumpling wrappers before I started because
because
I've
you
gone
love
through
them?
so many.
Yeah.
But I would have to say tea. I every day I have like my herbal tea and coffee. Can I
See,
have
I knew there
three?
was something I liked about you.
I
I'm a
mean,
tea addict. I love tea.
oh my gosh, I have some right here.
I
Yeah,
made the mistake of making coffee for my mom the other day, and she was like, "Oh, this coffee is terrible." Well, I don't drink coffee, so I
yeah,
have an excuse.
yeah. My husband doesn't drink coffee, and I drink coffee, and it's funny living with someone that has a very different taste as you. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
that is funny. Okay,
Yeah.
so what's your favorite app on your phone?
Okay. You know what? I'm always in Snapchat. I'm in there a lot, and I hope it doesn't die with like the Instagram stories like becoming very popular because I really do enjoy it. I feel like it's your own my own little diary, and I
Yes.
don't think I have like a ton of Snapchat followers, but I really like it, and
Yes.
so I'm in there a lot. I'm in there like I used to be on Instagram. I'm still present on Instagram every day.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but I feel like Instagram has changed a little bit over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm in Facebook a lot too.
Yes.
That's a great source of traffic, and I feel like I authentically use it. So
Yes. It always feels good when there's social media that you not only use to get traffic, but you also actually like using it. That's nice.
absolutely.
Okay, so do you
Yeah.
do you have any time for TV at all? And if you do you have a favorite show?
We don't have cable,
Okay, neither
and
do I.
that's partly because we're frugal and partly because we're just like we don't have time for
Yes.
it. We have Netflix and we have Amazon Prime. So I do have some recommendations. I really enjoyed Mr. Robot. I don't know if you've
Oh
heard of
yeah,
that. I
we
believe
watched
that's
that.
Amazon Prime. I haven't finished it, so don't like.
I won't
I'm
say.
kind of like hoarding the final episodes to like
Yes, we
save
do
for a
that too.
rainy day. And then I binge watched The Crown. It's
Ah,
very
that's a great
cerebral.
show.
You know, if
Yes.
you love Downton Abbey, you're gonna love The Crown. And and then I'm looking forward to the Twin Peaks reboot, but I don't get Showtime, so I don't know how I'm gonna watch that. So, because my husband and I are David Lynch fans, which his stuff
Yes.
can be kind of dark, but I appreciate like the cinema of it.
Well, if you like dark and you have Amazon Prime, you should definitely do that Man in the High Castle. Have you already watched that?
I've started watching
Oh my
that,
God, it's freaky.
and I'm saving that.
Yes, I can see why.
Yes, and I also recommend The OA, which is on Netflix. And that's if you're
Oh,
into like kind of spirituality. And this is like the OA was one thing I didn't look because sometimes I go and like look on Wikipedia, like the plot summaries while I'm watching it to get this kind of like brings me more joy as I'm like
yeah.
watching something. I didn't watch any spoilers for that. And I, of course, always enjoy Chef's Table and anything
Yes.
Anthony Bourdain and Andrew Zimmern do.
Yes.
I enjoy watching them a lot.
Ah, that sounds wonderful. So how can people find you online?
Okay, so lifeslittlesweets.com, that's the name of my site. And everywhere is Life's Little Sweets, except for Twitter, it's Life's Lil Sweets, like LIL in the middle.
Okay.
So I have on my site under the new About tab a Join My Community contact page, and it lists every social media that I'm on, linked to the Snapchat, Pinterest, Life's Little Sweets as well, the LIL. So that's where people can find me.
Wonderful. Sarah, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I had a really great time.
Thank you, Marley. It was very much a pleasure.
Thanks to Sara Maniez for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. Be sure to go to choppedpodcast.com to learn more about today's show. Thanks for your reviews of the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher and your social media shout outs as well. I also appreciate all the emails and everything that you've sent my way really means so much. Please keep it coming and please keep spreading the word. You inspire me, and I hope today's show was helpful and inspirational to you as well. Thanks for listening and have a great week.